Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Interviewing Wednesdays. You're watching us during our special guest interview speaker series during the month of April. Today is April 21st. For those people on Zoom, if you have questions throughout the presentation, please just open up the chat box, put them in the chat box, put your question in the chat box, and we'll get them answered either during the presentation or at the end. Our speaker has a session time set up for Q&A. For those people on Facebook, please just send your questions in the comment field. I am monitoring that feed, and I'll be sure to get those questions answered. Please note this event is currently being recorded and is currently live on Facebook. The recording will be on the Career DFW Facebook page and the Career USA YouTube channel for others to view in the future. By participating in this event, and if you happen to post a comment in the chat box, you have your microphone or camera on, you give consent for your comment, name, and picture to appear. All right. Well, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jeff Morris. Back in 2008, I started Career DFW to help those in the Dallas-Fort Worth area in their job search. In 2012, I launched CareerUSA.org. I've written a book called What I've Learned About Your Job Search. It's available on Amazon. Since 2007, have been facilitating and leading the North Dallas Plano Career Focus Group. The group's been around since the late 1990s. I took it over in 2007, and I'll tell you about our upcoming program at the end of this session. And since 2017, I've been part of the practice interview team. Well, before we get started to our speaker, we want to talk a little bit about the practice interview team. So good afternoon, Mark.
Well, hello, everybody. And I'm looking forward to today's presentation about behavioral interviewing, because it's probably the #1 thing that we give people feedback on in their practice interview is how to be more effective in answering those types of questions. So good for Paul. I'm looking forward to hearing it. So the pit crew's going strong. Last week we did 5 interviews. This week only 2. I don't know what causes that, but today's Wednesday. We could still have a practice interview for you on Friday if you're ready to go. And ready to go means you have a job description and a resume to send into the pit crew, and you have about an hour and 15 minutes on Friday afternoon to hold the interview. So that's how we work. We take the information that you provide and we give you a very customized and personalized interview experience based on that job description and, of course, your background and the resume. And before we get started with the interviews, we give you a chance to tell us what your goals are for that particular interview. So if there's something in particular you'd like to practice, like maybe how to answer the question, why did you leave your last position, then we'll make sure and cover that. But otherwise, the interview experience is based on the experience of our panelists. They're all hiring managers. Many of them are in job transition, just like you. A few are retired, like myself, and so have been hiring managers when we were working and continue to give back in our retirement towards your success, landing your next opportunity. So if you're ready, or when you're ready, send that job description and your resume to dallaspitcrew@gmail.com. Also include in there when you would be available for +2 days and +3 days, and we'll match up panelists with your schedule. We do them every day of the week, Monday through Friday, sometimes on the weekends. They're recorded on Zoom. And so you get a copy of the recording and the feedback that's given afterwards. And you don't have to have an opportunity in hand to practice. You can just pick a job description that looks good to you. Maybe it's your dream job, and send that in, because every time you practice, you are going to become a better interviewer. And so we want to get you to the point where answering questions is pretty solid. And then you can focus during the interview on making a connection with the interviewer, building rapport, asking your own questions, and those kinds of things, that'll take you to the next level and assure that you'll be the final candidate selected in your job search. And the best part of all, it's completely free, no charge at all. I also want to mention that, and I like to do this during the Wednesday meetings, is I do one other thing besides manage the pit crew, and that's I coach on the topic, why did you leave your last position? So if that's a complicated answer for you, for some people, it's not really complicated, right? They were in an industry that's had some financial difficulty and they needed to lay off, reduce their staff, and they laid off 50 people and you were one of 50 people. Okay, so that's pretty straightforward. But if it's more complicated than that, maybe it was a layoff of one, maybe you got a negative review and then you got laid off, we can have a conversation about how to tell that story. And so that's a coaching session, and we do that one-on-one confidentially. So if you'd like to take advantage of that, just send an email to Pit Crew email and we'll schedule a time for that. Just put up my LinkedIn profile. All you have to do is put in a little message that says we met on Wednesday afternoon at Interview Wednesdays, and I'll add you to my network, and that'll help you find people inside your target companies in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. That's the big advantage of joining networks, and joining anyone's network is you get access to their connections as well. So thank you, Jeff.
Thank you very much, Mark.
And I'm posting up my contact information right now. There you go.
Great. All right. Well, y'all have gotten really, sorry about the slides moving around so fast. Walt, tell us about the Interview Success Workshop.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. We look forward to today. I really believe that behavioral interviewing is one of the strongest ways we can demonstrate the three things that we sell to what they're buying in an interview, which is who you are, what you do, and how you can help. I'm really glad that Paul's going to share his knowledge. I know he's done a deep dive into that. And I can remember picking up behavioral event interviewing. I'm not going to tell you how many years ago, but it is really such a strong tool. So today should be a good session. But I like to help people with their interviewing skills as well. So I offer the free Interview Success Workshop. So the workshop part comes in the fact that it's very informal. I'll cover categories of questions. You get a question out of each of the 11 categories. It's kind of it's not a smooth interview. It's really the fundamentals and basics and approaches, strategies, options, structures that you might use to responding to that kind of category of question. So that once we get a handle on those basics, then we can work on the real interview. And it's similar to basketball. If you can't dribble and you can't shoot, no need to go out on the court. So we need to learn to dribble and shoot in our interviewing as well. So that when we get out on the court, we can use those tools to be successful. So look me up on LinkedIn. The About section gives details of it. You will get a video of your interview. You get a video of a handout, also with a lot of information about what I'm covering in the workshop itself. And so I enjoy just having a good time. The whole purpose is to increase our skills and thus our confidence in an interview. So it's great to have confidence when you go into an interview. We'll go over some of the things you can prepare in advance. We'll go over some options that you can look at. I'd like to have you feel comfortable on how to answer the salary question, whoever asks it, the opening, the closing, those kinds of things that we cover in detail. So sign up, send me an email to my Yahoo email address, and I'll be glad to give you some availability dates, and we'll get you scheduled. So you can come on down and enjoy learning without squirming.
Great. Thank you very, very much. All right. During the month of April, we have 4 special guest speakers. So normally Mark and Walt have put together a 13-part workshop. They're getting the month of April off. They'll start back up again on May 5th. So today is the 21st of April. So today, Paul Walsh is with us, and he's going to talk about how to survive behavioral interviews. Paul will tell us a little bit about his background as he gets started here. So Paul, thank you for being with us, and the show's all yours.
Okay. All right. So do I guess I just press on this and I now have the screen, or? Yeah, looks like. All right, good. And everybody see that?
Nope. Oh, here it comes.
Okay,
There we go.
good. Okay, good. All right, good. I piggyback on what both Mark and Walt is saying, that the behavioral interviewing is just one of the many tools. There are so many different approaches to interviews that really what they have said, and what I advocate very strongly, is the more tools you have in your toolbox, the more accurate you can be in how to fix a problem. If you only have one tool and that tool is a hammer, then it's no problem if all your issues are nails. But if you want to open up a Swiss watch, well, that hammer will get the Swiss watch open, but you might not like the rest of the results. So having the right tool is be able to do it. So the more you can learn about the various different interview styles and approaches and techniques, the better off you will be. I'm here today to talk about behavioral interviews and where that comes from and how that how you can survive it. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to tell you about a little bit about myself. I've been in the HR business for over 20 years. I've been also worked in the information technology and the logistics management fields as well. But my first love and always has been is the human resources. That's why I received a master's degree in HR. And early on in my career, after I left the military, I was certified by DDI and Zinger Miller in their approaches to behavioral interviewing. And using that knowledge, I've conducted well over 1,800 interviews using BI and English and in Spanish, helping companies and my clients be able to get to where they wanted to be. I've also trained hundreds of HR professionals, hiring managers, leaders who have worked throughout the entire world, who are in the position to be able to use behavioral interviewing to select the proper candidates. And like Mark said, I'm a part of the Dallas pit crew as well. So I enjoy that process and helping others prepare for the interviewing. So let's go on to the next slide, if we can get there. And the agenda for today is I'm going to talk about the interviewer. This is the reason I'm talking about the interviewer and how he or she is prepared for the interview.
Paul, excuse me, we're not seeing your net. You didn't go, we're not seeing you advance your slides.
You're not seeing me advance my slides. Okay. So Coach, where am I? So let's see, slideshow from the beginning. All right. Can you see it now?
All we see is the very first slide. So you try to advance to the next one.
Okay.
There you go.
There you go. All right. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and talk about the interviewer and what training the interviewer receives in order to be able to effectively use a behavioral interview. This is because I've done a lot of workshops and trained people on how to use behavioral interviewing techniques and processes, but also to couple that with body language and how to use body language and certain other visual and oral clues to be able to understand where the candidate is coming from. This is because I want you to be able to be prepared for the behavioral interview so that you are on an equal playing field with the behavioral interview. Some people have walked into behavioral interviews, been asked a question to tell me about a time when, and all of a sudden they found, hey, I'm lost. Where am I? So let's go ahead and go on to the next slide. I'm going to talk about the historical background of behavioral interviews. In fact, I'm going to bring up the next slide here. There are two major schools in the Western psychology field of psychology. One is called cognitive psychology, and that is the area where we look on the inside, what the person is coming from. And people who have worked on that include Freud and Erikson, and more recently people like Hershey Blanchard and others. You also may be familiar with the Myers-Briggs inventory as one of the tools that some companies use in the hiring process. These are all cognitive psychology. What they are doing is they're looking on the person inside. What motivates that person? What is the background of that person? What does that person believe? We can't get that directly, it's not directly observable, but it is something that can be tried to be measured by such tools as the Myers-Briggs and the DISC. Some people may be aware of. At best, it's a best educated guess. Based upon those tools, what do we know about the person? The other school, however, is a behavioral psychologist. The behavioral psychologist is probably the dominant. Most of the people in the United States, in the UK especially, are trained in behavioral interviewing, behavioral sciences. Behavioral sciences this is the B.F. Skinner. This is where we get down to specifics of observable and non-observable behaviors. We're going to look at observable behaviors. There's two levels: the unconscious behaviors, that is, what you do, what other people can see, but you don't realize you're doing. That might be something as simply as scratching yourself. You're scratching your face while you're in a discussion. but it also could be conscious and deliberate behaviors. And the behavioral interviewer is trained to do both. They are directly observable behaviors. Because they are counted on even more because you can count them, you can measure them, you can replicate them in scientific surveys and so on. And because they are observable behaviors, we get a better guess as to what's going on. Now, that may or may not be true, and I'll discuss that specifically in a moment. Going forward, the philosophy of behavioral interviewing is essentially based upon that behavioral psychology. And here we're believing that the behaviors that resulted in success or were positively reinforced are those behaviors that tend to be replicated. So if you had success in dealing, say, with a difficult customer in the past, and you use a specific process and you achieve success, that behavior is most likely to be repeated. So the behavioral interviewer believes that the past is a reliable predictor of the future. If that's the case, then they're going to look for incidents in your past, which will allow them to guess how you will perform doing a similar situation on the job. So if you were successful with dealing with that irate customer before, you probably will use the same process and be able to deal with that customer in your present job, or the job for which you're being interviewed. So how to recognize a behavioral interviewer or interviewing situation? Well, they will use a question like, tell me about a time when. They will tell you such things as, give me a specific example of when you did such and such. Or they may say, draw me a picture of how you, what situation you were when you did such and such. Or simply, how did you handle that? Whatever questions they ask, they will essentially be doing a behavioral interview, and you're going to know what to do about that because we're going to give you the tools just a little bit. Okay, so there are three major categories of behavioral interview questions. First and foremost are your success stories. Now, on your resume, you have probably listed all your successes. And if you've been coached properly, you probably have listed your successes with quantifiable numbers. I increased sales percent by 20%. I reduced costs by 50%. I was the top sales performer for the last 3 quarters of last year. Whatever those are probably on your resume. And those are also part of your success stories, things that you accomplish, and you can prove it by telling the proper story. But there's another type of question, and that's your challenges and your failures. The challenges are what you did when you were in a difficult situation. What obstacles did you have to overcome? How did you approach that particular obstacle or challenge? And what was the results? But you notice the second part of that was failures. Now, I don't know of anybody that has ever put on their resume that I was colossally messed up this particular sales approach and I lost a $2 million sale. I don't think anybody's ever going to put that on your resume. You certainly don't want to even talk about that in the interview, but it tells a lot about your personality, how you handle particular failures, what you learn from it, and what you're doing differently now could tell your interview a whole lot about your courage, your perseverance, how you overcome that difficulty, and what you learn from it and going forward, what you will be able to bring to your prospective employer. The third category is interpersonal dynamics. There will be questions on your behavioral interview which will ask you about how you dealt with a colleague who is particularly obstinate or difficult to work with, how you dealt with a supervisor or a superior, or how you dealt with a subordinate. Or the most critical is how you dealt with a customer who's having issues with your organization. Those types of questions are absolutely critical because this is going to determine how well you fit into the organization. So being ready with interpersonal dynamics types of survey questions rather will be good for you because you'll be ready for that type of question. This is the structure of behavioral interview responses, and we call it the STAR format. The STAR format is essentially, what situation were you facing? When, in some detail, but not too long, maybe 1 or 2 sentences. What were your tasks and responsibilities related to that particular situation? And what were your specific actions, not your team's actions, not your company's response, not what your boss told you to do, but what were your specific actions? And I'll give you an example later in this presentation of how a person actually handled a crisis situation. But most importantly is the results. Wow, how did it turn out? What resulted from your effort, your specific efforts? Now, there are some organizations that use a different format called the SAR or PAR, P-A-R, instead of the STAR format. Some people say it's just a fancy acronym, but it's much more than that. The PAR approach essentially combines the first two into what is called a problem. I resist that simply because all the situations you face may not have been a problem. It may have been something entirely different, like an opportunity that you saw that you were able to capitalize on and be able to bring your company even more profits, more successes, or reduce their losses. An opportunity that you saw that you were actually able to implement. Or it might be something that's completely different, an innovative idea, something that nobody has ever done before. And you are actually able to put it together and present it and get it into play within your organization. So use whatever tool that you think is appropriate, and we'll come back to that more than once today. Okay, so how does a behavioral interviewer get trained? And how does he or she get ready to do their actual recruiting? Assuming that the job responsibilities have already been mapped out, then you can go with whatever the job descriptions that are in existence. But I remember seeing one job description that told about you must be able to choose the right amount of carbon papers to insert behind the document to be able to make copies for our records. That job description was probably a little bit out of date and probably hasn't been touched since 1956 when it was first written. Most job descriptions are fairly good and reusable, but what about a new job, a position that hasn't existed before? For example, how many jobs that have been created related to COVID-19 last year and since then? Those didn't exist before. And so they had to be created and hatched. So this is what a behavioral interviewer, an experienced one especially, will do. First, they'll determine what behaviors are required for this particular position. They will then format the questions to be able to elicit the proper responses from the candidate and how to determine if that candidate has that experience and or the ability to be able to resolve that issue. And they will actually use a lot of body language interpretation. Body language is absolutely critical to this whole process. So let's go back a little bit. What they will also learn during their training is word choice and learning style. How does that relate to the job interview? Well, a way a person learns, the way a person communicates is usually pretty much fixed. Most people will use one of several different styles as a dominant learning style. They will also use that as the communication style. If they do so, then you can adjust yourself. Basic systems theory, which is an engineering concept, says that the most flexible component of any system is the part of the system which controls the system. The more flexible you are as a job interviewee, the better off you will be in responding to the situation, be able to control at least part of the interview. In most cases, that, however, relies on the actual interviewer, because he or she has been trained to do that type of thing. We'll talk about eye contact, and we'll go into a little bit more detail on eye contact in a moment. But eye contact is critically important. It's even when you are on a Zoom interview like today, looking directly into the camera is critical to be able to prolong the necessary eye contact and become believable. They will also, interviewer will be looking for nervousness. And there are lots of body language clues to how nervous a person can be. And they will also look for consistency between the body language of the person and the words they are choosing to say. In fact, some research has shown that 80% of any communication between two persons is actually body language, the non-verbal communication part of the package. And if that is so, then being aware of behavior is critical to on both sides of the conversation. So let's talk about learning styles for a moment. Learning styles are basically in 4 different categories. One is visual, the next is auditory, and we have 2 different types of kinesthetic, and then there's the olfactory. Visual learners, visual learning style, essentially a person that you can recognize by the use of their words. They will say, draw me a picture. I saw the solution. They will use words that relate to sight. They're also usually very impeccable. Their attire is perfect. They probably just recently pressed their suit before they came to the interview to make sure that it looks good. They are very aware of their environment, which is always immaculate, always clean and organized. A visual learner will present themselves using visual clues, and eye contact, of course, is one of those. The second one is auditory. I'm an auditory person, as you probably can tell. I like to communicate orally. I listen very carefully to other people, and I communicate using words out loud. I prefer not to necessarily write everything down, but that's not a drawback. In fact, people can learn to be one or the other and adapt accordingly. The third is kinesthetic. The kinesthetic learner is 2 types. One is they're external, which means they're constantly in motion. These are the people that will open up a box, take out a new toy, whatever it is, device. They will never, ever even open up the shrink wrap on the user's manual. They will immediately sit down and start poking at it and trying to make things work when they learn by doing rather than learn by a lecture or reading a manual. Because they are such, they are constantly moving around, they're fidgeting. It may be interpreted as nervousness, but it's simply part of their nature. The other part is the internal or emotional. If you know anything about Greek at all, Greek language, it means inside. So emotion really literally means the motion inside. And feelings and hurt and anger, and those are all clues that are there. And the kinesthetic, internal kinesthetic learner will be a person that can be very moody, can be very thoughtful, but also can feel very deeply. A concept like patriotism will be a very important part of their lives, as certainly was of mine. The 4th category is olfactory. And people say taste and smell. Well, okay, yes, but actually this is true. I remember being in an interview where a person came in who was probably not the most hygienic person in the world. And I knew that immediately this person would not be a good fit for the organization because cleanliness was part of the overall culture into which he was going to be emerging. And I could tell right away that that person probably would not fit very well within the organization and with the team. So those are factors that do affect the job interview, and that's what they're looking for. Now let's talk about one of those, especially the visual learner. The prolonged or erratic eye contact can be a very important clue, but especially for a visual learner. A visual person will be very comfortable with prolonged eye contact. However, a person who is an auditory or kinesthetic probably will not be very comfortable. They won't be able to maintain long eye contact. They will be thinking about things, and their eyes will be moving around. They will be uncomfortable. A visual interviewer, however, will start to interpret that this person is lying to me because they're not making eye contact with me for very long periods of time. That's not true. It is not true. It's only true if both parties are visual learners. If the prolonged eye contact doesn't happen, then that there might be a factor along that. But if there are any other learning style, they probably will be uncomfortable with prolonged eye contact. So the instructor, the instructor of a behavioral interview workshop will probably point that out and coach the interviewers to make sure they understand that particular process. There are also in eye contact concerns around culture, gender, and social norms that affect the amount of eye contact. There are some cultures where a woman, for example, is not allowed to engage in prolonged eye contact with any male. That's something that's part of their culture, perhaps might be their religious background, or it might be from some other reason that you want to make sure that you understand that prolonged eye contact may be uncomfortable for another reason other than they're lying to me. So also the handshake. Now with COVID-19, we don't do that a whole lot anymore because of the fact that we can transmit germs. But prior to COVID-19, handshake was a very important part of the first interaction. It was the first time that you actually touched the other person very often. And a firm handshake was a good sign of a person that was confident and poised and ready to take a job, especially if there were serious responsibilities to that job, like in the leadership or management role. Open hand, they're taught to use an open hand to be able to avoid things like crushing fingers like this. You've seen that. And there's also clues to your personality as to how confident you are. But again, there are gender norms. Some people are, because of their religious background or their cultural background, do not touch on their first contact. And that's something you have to be aware of if you are an interviewer, because that is something that you have to not only acknowledge, but respect, because you're going to really cause some issues. As a person who is being interviewed, you also have to be aware of the fact that this might be a norm for them. Or might not be a norm. So a handshake is something that probably we may see going out of the way because of the COVID-19 issues, but it's still around for some places. Now, nerves. These are mostly unconscious behaviors. How do you display your nervous condition? Well, I'm going to talk about that in more length in a little bit. But these behaviors that you exhibit are observable by the trained interviewer. He or she looks for those types of things. And when you are nervous, they begin to look a little bit more closely. So you want to be aware of your behaviors as the interviewee, but you also, as an interviewer, want to be aware of your own behaviors and how you perceive the interviewee. So we go into a great deal about unconscious behaviors, especially if they relate to the nerves. They may be responses to situations or questions that they may ask or be challenged on. And it does have a direct relationship to the learning style of the individual on both sides. So being aware of that is important. So I want to introduce a new concept, punctured behavior. Now, you won't find this in any dictionary anywhere. It's a term that I coined several years ago to explain behavior that is affected by the presence or absence of an authority figure. And I want to explain that just a little bit more, I think. Let me give you an example. You're driving down the road on the interstate. You look over to your right and you see the posted speed limit is 70 miles an hour. You glance down at your speedometer and you find out you're doing what? 72, 75, 80. Now, don't raise your hands because we have this thing called the Fifth Amendment in the United States. But how many of you really do that kind of thing? Now, you get to the top of the hill and you look forward at the bottom of the hill, there's a blue and red light flashing. A state trooper has pulled over some driver. What do you do immediately? Well, the first thing almost everybody will do is hit the brake. And the second thing you will do is glance down to your speedometer and slow your speed down to the point where you are probably doing 68, maybe even 65. So when you're passing by that state trooper, you are well within the speed limit. Those are examples of both types of behavior, but the absence and the presence. The first one was the absence of the behavior of the authority figure, and the second one was with the presence of the authority figure. Now, I'll give you one more example and we'll close this particular point. How many of you have ever used what my grandmother used to call colorful language? These are the words that usually have 4 letters in them, and occasionally you let one of those rip in a particular situation to express your frustration, etc. Many people do that. Some people don't even realize they're doing that, but many people do that type of thing. But now let's put an authority figure, like let's say the pastor of your church. Do you ever use that kind of language around there? Or if you were in a court in front of a judge, or the ultimate authority figure, your mother. How many of you will actually use that kind of language in front of your mother? Well, those examples of punctured behaviors that apply to almost everybody that I know of. So how does this relate to you and the behavioral interviewer and the interview process as a whole? First, the interviewer is an authority figure. That person holds power to be able to either hire you if they're the hiring manager, or if they are a screening interview from HR, they at least have the power to be able to pass you up the chain to the hiring manager. So there is perceived power there. And if they are behavioral interview trained, they have the ability to be able to watch you very closely. It's one of those situations where you might feel very exposed, and it may be uncomfortable, but I'm here to try to give you some tools to be able to handle that. How do you recognize behavioral interview, punctured behaviors rather? The way to do it is not to ask, what am I doing? What is this? Behaviors are mostly unconscious. Some of them are deliberate, but mostly unconscious, but they are observable by the interviewer. And especially if he or she has been trained to look for those behaviors. They are very often misinterpreted. Just a little while ago, my wife walked into me, and as I was preparing for this interview, and I'm sitting right underneath the air conditioning vent in my office. When the door is closed, it sometimes gets pretty cold in this room. As a result, my arms were crossed. Now, many people have been told that when your arms are crossed, you're probably defensive, or you're withholding information or trying to protect yourself. In actuality, it's because I'm right below the air conditioning vent. So it's may be interpreted, and the best way to, of course, to do that is to handle that is to ask the questions: wait, are you cold, or what's going on? Now, if they're unconscious, how do you actually find out that you have this behavior? Many of us do exhibit certain behaviors. I see people playing with their hair. They'll be clutching their necklace or something like that. They may be doing things that they are totally unaware of, but other people can see. So let's say you find somebody that actually will be able to coach you. I happen to have a granddaughter who noticed that I sometimes, when I'm really pensive, I'll play with my wedding ring. When she asked me, why do you do that so often? I told her, well, it's because I'm thinking about how much I love your grandma and you. And she seemed to be happy with that answer. But I didn't realize until she pointed it out to me that sometimes I actually do that. So being unaware of it, I wasn't able to address it, and I didn't even know what's happening. And what other people might think about that, what does that mean? I didn't know it because I couldn't address it. I didn't know that was happening. Now that I do, I can address that specific behavior. So what examples do you see of punctured behavior? Well, there are 4 major categories. First is verbal clues. The verbal clues include rapid speech. People who are just going on and on and on, like perhaps I've been doing today. This means that, there are some issues that are involved that you're often very not aware of, but there's also a lot that you can be aware of, such as the non-words. As you probably heard people go, my favorite is basically. Basically, what's really happening there is people are caught unaware, unprepared, and are trying to think of an answer, and those non-words just fit in there to fill the airspace. They don't really contribute anything to the conversation. However, they can come out very quickly. The next is voice. Some people will talk with a monotone and hardly ever vary their speech. and you know how quickly that can cause somebody else on the listening side to fall off and nod off to sleep. There are also people like me who are very melodic, and yet that too can be too much of a good thing at certain times. I emphasize certain words and emphasize certain actions. I also use body language sometimes to be able to reinforce the words that I'm speaking. Those are types of things that people do without even realizing it. They may go too slow and cause people to tell them to hurry up, or they're talking too fast. They're also raising and lowering questions. If you say, for example, I am the best fit for the person, I'm the best, or very most fit person for this job, you end on the uptone, it ceases to become a statement. It has become a question. And that is how it's perceived by other people. And specifically, it could be a death blow to your efforts if you don't sound confident. On the other hand, the lowering of your voice does have an effect, because lowering your voice and ending on a downward pitch, actually reinforces it as being a firmer, definite statement. And as a result, it will have more impact and effect on your overall result. There's also a lot of body language clues. People that pull their ear, they'll push the hair back, they'll stretch without even realizing they're doing it. All these type of body language behaviors can really affect the quality of your response to any question or concern that the behavioral interviewer might have. And he or she is trained to look for that. There are also gestures such as pointing with your finger. That's not a good thing to do. Leaning in or out, especially if you're walking back and forth like this, that's probably not a good thing to do during an interview. Also fidgeting, pulling your hair, playing with your jewelry, whatever. Those type of behaviors indicate that there's some nerves there, and the behavior interviewer is trained to look for why that is the case. So how do you change abusive behavior? Assuming that you have somebody that you know and love and trust to be able to inform you of the fact that you are exhibiting these specific behaviors, it requires first that you raise it to your conscious behavior. You have to raise it to the conscious level to know that you're doing it. I mentioned the wedding ring earlier. I didn't know I was doing this. I can't change it. Now, knowing that I do know about it, I can make a conscious decision to not do that, or to be at least aware that I sometimes do that. And when you are trying to overcome an abusive behavior that you may be exhibiting automatically, and you recognize that there is such a behavior, and somebody has been able to, who loves you or cares about you, has been able to show you that is observable, then you can practice it. You must be consistent on it. It takes on the average 2 weeks for a new behavior to become a habit. And if you are willing to take the time and be consistently aware, every time I feel myself play with my ring, I'm going to say, no, I shouldn't be doing that, and stop it, do something else. So again, the way to overcome the nervousness, the abusive behaviors, is be ready with a proper answer. Now, in every field, there will be certain qualities and characteristics you can expect in the interview. If you are, for example, in the financial field, you're going to expect an answer about integrity, honesty, accuracy. These are questions that you're going to be asked about during the interview. So if you have a specific example from your past that you can put into the STAR format, this was the situation. I was faced with it. I was working in accounting, and I noticed a particular problem, blah, blah, blah. And you go on with a specific story, then you can address their concerns, and that's one more check mark in your favor on that checklist. So STAR is a really good tool to be able to help you prepare for that interview. Okay, some of the questions that typically come up during a behavior interview, and I'll give you these examples, but there are tons more, and I'll show you where to get those in a little bit. Tell me about a situation when you are dealing with a troublesome colleague. This is, of course, designed to be able to elicit situations of how well you deal with interpersonal situations, the interpersonal dynamics that I referred to earlier. And this is very often use to determine how well you will fit into an organization. I remember one person in an interview told me about how during the introduction to the team, one person attempted to belittle him right away and physically attacked him and landed a punch. And this person took him down and knocked him down to the ground. Well, that immediately set up lots of red flags for me, because this person is comfortable with violence in the workplace. This is kind of behavior that you don't want to do. You don't want to be able to tell about. So how did you deal with a troublesome colleague? Tells a lot about how well you handle difficult situations, your interpersonal skills, how you were able to resolve the issue without resorting to overwhelming violence or bringing the hammer down on that person. Describe a situation when you succeeded in a difficult situation. So they want to know more about how you handle difficulties, failures, problems, issues, obstacles. How did you handle a setback or a failure? And again, remember I told you about failures are important revelations on your part about how your character works, how you think through things, how you deal with it, and the outcomes of that particular situation. That tells a lot, again, about your fit for the organization. Another typical question is, describe the most innovative idea that you have had and what happened. How well were you innovative, and how well were you able to sell the idea through your interpersonal skills? There will be another one. One that I see a lot is, what is your biggest regret in your career? You don't want to talk too much about, hey, I took a job and I screwed it up and I got fired after being there for 2 weeks. That's probably not something you want to talk about. And it's certainly something that you want to avoid. But there are sometimes when you made decisions that you probably said, well, in the back, looking back on it, I probably should have taken X job instead of the Y job. I probably would have been happier. That's something you should be able to relate and tell what you learned about this. Then another question, particularly to leaders, is, how did you motivate your colleagues in a particular type of situation? These are questions that are typical, and there's lots more, and I'll show you where to get those in a moment. Tell me about an experience with an upset customer or client. This is critical. Remember, every business is in business to be able to sell things or sell products or services. And if you are in the products and services business, then if you did deal successfully with an irate customer or a person that wanted more than what they thought they received and what they were due, then how you dealt with that particular situation is going to be critical. Again, the STAR format is critical to be able to address that particular situation. And now, relating to our specific company, what is the most critical experience that you've had which will help us move forward? This might be something that you should be well prepared for, because remember, they're not hiring you just because you need a job. They're not hiring you because you need a paycheck. They're not hiring you because you have 2 children and a mortgage payment due. That's not why they're hiring. They're hiring you because they have a need, they have a pain, they have some gap in their capabilities, and they are considering you to be the person that's going to help that problem, that issue, make that pain go away. So what experiences that you have comes from more what you have done to research the company and the organization. If you know dramatically this particular company is in an industry that is exploding, then you know one of the problems is bringing on new talent and retaining them properly. Then you could be prepared to help address that particular issue. You're going to be seen as the perfect fit. If, however, you don't know anything about the company or the industry, and it's something totally new for you, then they're going to go pass on you for somebody who's more qualified. One of their favorite questions is, where do you see yourself in 5 years or 10 years? Well, I'm not sure that's a great question anymore, because very often people don't last for 5 years or 10 years. They may be a person that's looking here just to get the basic credentials and experiences on their resume, and they're going to move on to something where they feel that they can expand and grow and get more money. that's where do you see yourself in 5 years? Well, you can actually design a star response to that. Be able to say what you plan to do, how you're going to get there, and what actions you're taking and are going to take, and what results you are expecting from it. So there is an applicability of the star format to that particular type of question. There will be questions about your challenges. There will be questions about multiple projects. There'll be asking questions about how well you handle things under pressure. And those are all really valid questions, and they can all be answered with the star format. Okay. All right. Now, the online resources that are available to you that I've identified, the most important one, I think the most complete one is on LinkedIn. LinkedIn has an area where they actually list all of the most common interview types of questions, including behavioral interview. And you can actually drill down to specifically focus on behavioral interviewing questions and be prepared. They also list why they are asking that type of question. In other words, what are they seeking to know about you? And they also tell you how to prepare and format your response to be able to do that. They also have videos about a number of things about how to frame an answer to almost any interview question or situation. There are also similar offerings on job sites such as Career Builder, Indeed, ZipRecruiter, and Glassdoor. However, you usually have to be signed up with those particular job boards and getting their job offers in order to access some of those resources. But there are just so many things available on the internet. You can use Google to get out to them and ask the 10 most common interview questions and how to answer them. You do that search and you will find a number of different resources that are available. Many of them are free. Most of them are free, in fact. People who have actually been there, done that, and are willing to share their experience about it. So search for common interview questions and search specifically for behavioral interview if you anticipate that that is going to be the type of interview that you are in. So we are at the part where you get to participate. Jeff, I don't have access right now to the.
The first, Michael says, I found it very successful to put the R first in the discussion to get the interviewer's attention. So I guess tell the result first in your star story. What are your thoughts on that?
I would agree with that. And that's a valid strategy because they want to know, well, I saved my company $2 million by redesigning a particular process. Is that immediately going to get their attention? Then you can go into more detail. The idea of a star story, any star story, whichever order you prefer to take it, is that you are dealing with an actual situation, but you're doing so in a succinct manner. 90 seconds to about 120 seconds is the average for a good star story. If the interviewer has more concerns about it, then they're going to drill down. They're going to ask you more in-depth questions to tell how did you do that? What was your thinking process? They will go in there. So if you do start off with the results, then that's a good point. You definitely got their interest. If you can save their money, if you can cut down on their costs, if you can build up new revenues, that's going to get their attention. So I would say if that works for you, then absolutely you want to go for it.
Okay. Leslie said, I've heard that we should gently match the behavior of the interviewer in things like speed of speech and posture.
Yeah, that's called pacing. And pacing is simply that, just mirroring the image. However, be careful. I was once in an interview where I was meeting with a financial services manager, and he immediately started pacing me and my wife as we were thinking about investing some money with their firm. We both, having been trained in this particular process, we both recognized what was going on immediately, and he was trying to manipulate us. Well, Matt, tell me, imagine yourself 3 years from now, what you're going to be looking at, etc. That type of pacing can actually be intrusive. And if a person is trained and experienced and looking for it, that can actually turn you off. We decided to go with a different financial services as a result of that, because we just did not feel that we were going to be, we did not want to be manipulated. And if you are in the job search and you start doing that, do so with caution, because if he or she recognizes what you're doing, That's the immediate death row. You're not going to succeed. But do it so succinctly, very carefully, to be able to do that. In fact, when I met my wife, I had just been trained in one of those processes. I was using it to the utmost because I thought this was the most exciting woman I've ever met, and it backfired on me because she was trained, not only trained in the same process, but she was the certified trainer of people using that particular process. I felt, very exposed at the particular situation. So, but must have turned out right. 36 years later, 4 children and 6 grandchildren. I must have done something right. But she said, I was so flattered that you were trying so hard. I was intrigued. But be careful. Be careful about using that pacing process. And if you detect there's some irritation on the part of the interviewer, turn it off immediately and just be natural and behave and respond. Let them take the lead.
All right. Could you speak a little bit about core competencies in a job or for a job?
Well, core competencies are natural. If you've done your homework with the particular job, you've also looked up the companies of what the company is looking for and the core competencies that are there. You also want to look at the values, that their values and mission statements on their website. The more you know about it, the better you are prepared. Core competencies, your match. The reason that you even get to talk to them in the first place is because there was something on your resume that caught their interest. The piece, some words, a word choice. You really would like to know what that is, what intrigued their interest in you, so that you can emphasize that and bring that forward. But knowing what your core competencies as well is a very good strategy. There's in the South Lake Focus Group here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, they strongly advocate using the Strength Finders inventory. It's a valuable tool. It was developed by people who should know what they're doing in the survey business, and it gives you a very good tool of identifying what your key strengths are, your 5 greatest strengths are, and capitalize on those and how that will solve your particular problem. In fact, put it on your resume if you want to. My particular one is learning. It's my strongest skill, learning how to learn, how to develop an understanding of what's going on. And I always approach learning from the situation of how can I teach this, which is my second strength, communications. Second is the third level is ideation, coming up with new or innovative or creative ideas. My next one is networking skills, which is I think pretty well. And last one was empathy. I can really understand where people are coming from, and I try to put myself in their shoes to be able to do so. So if you know what your core competencies are, you know what your core strengths are, you're better prepared for any interview. And if they're interested in you and at least you got you that far to the interview set process, you should capitalize upon that.
All right. Are there any other questions? Those are the only questions we had in the chat box or on the comments on Facebook. If anybody has got another question, you're welcome to unmute your mic and ask away.
Paul, this is Raul Otegui. I'm originally from Latin America, and my question is, what expression specifically you need to avoid to communicate? Because we have difference in the language. We have difference in the way that we communicate between Spanish and English. And my mother language is Spanish. Now, I'm usually more expressive. I usually more work a little more with my hands, with my body. I'm working to avoid all of this, but even so, because it's not your first language, you are crashing with the language processing, right? And your expressions usually are not reflecting what you feel really, or what you will be answering if you are answering in Spanish.
Well, I would agree with that. Since I speak Spanish and I'm married to a woman of Spanish heritage, I am fully aware of that. There are remarkable differences, and the more you know about it, the better off you are. I have the advantage of I traveled all around the world. I do speak multiple languages, including Spanish and French and German. And I've spent a lot of time in Europe and the Far East as well, where I've learned about cultures. Now, not everybody has that advantage, and behavior interviewers may or may not have that advantage. For example, somebody from South Asia may have a different approach to being able to interview than you have from South America. And because of the difference in cultures, I think its sensitivity has to be on part of both the person who's being interviewed and the interviewer to be able to recognize that there are cultural differences between two people. And that's normal and natural, but it doesn't necessarily rule out that the person is a good fit for the company. I recently looked at one particular website of a job that talked about diversity in their workforce. However, they only had, when they showed the pictures of all of their staff, I saw one Hispanic person, I saw one Black male, one Black female, and one person of South Asian heritage. This was not exactly what I view as diversity, and when everybody else was of the Caucasian race. But to answer your question, both parts need to be aware of the fact that there is a cultural difference, and that doesn't automatically preclude any particular candidate for a specific position, because you really want to focus on what you are doing. So Raul, you are doing the right thing to be aware of that and how that might be perceived. Hopefully on the other side of that, the interviewer is a person that recognizes that those differences are okay and still doesn't preclude any candidate from being the right fit for that organization and that position.
Great, thank you very much. Any other questions? Let's see here.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm aware that there are companies in the area that, have adopted that behavior interviewing style in their hiring process, and Texas Health Resources and Amazon are a couple. Are you aware of other companies in the DFW area that use this style for their hiring process?
Well, there are many. I can't name them off the top of my head, but I've encountered a few during my job search process as well. I've actually been on the receiving side of a behavioral interview. And so I recognized it immediately, and I was able to adjust my style because I had that particular tool. But there are companies that are either individuals within the organization who have been trained in this particular thing, like somebody in the HR department, or it may be something that the company overall has adopted. I've done both, where I've gone in as a trainer or as a consultant, gone into organizations where I've dealt with just people in the HR department, or I've done it with just a few of the key executives at the top of the company or the organization in the case of the public sector, where we were actually able to implement that particular process. Whether it trickled down from there, I don't know. Whether it's a universally used process, again, it varies from company to company, from organization to organization. So, but there are. I guarantee you that you will encounter it somewhere during your process, because last estimates that I saw were over 5 years ago. And at that particular point, in the United States and Canada and the UK, over 38 million people have been trained in behavioral interviewing type processes and techniques. That increases the odds dramatically that you will encounter somewhere during your job search process somebody who is trained as a behavioral interviewer. So as a result, I would be ready for almost anything, including something new that's come up. And this is where behavioral interviewing actually does help, is that there's a new process that I've seen, and I actually did it two in 1 week, where a company actually uses what is called one-way interviewing. And they will ask you a question online, and you have a chance to actually record an answer. That you're not actually live interviewing with the person. You're not interacting with the person. You're just interacting with your camera on your computer. And in this, they will ask questions like, tell me about a time when. So they're using behavioral interviewing process, but you don't have an interaction. So the better prepared you are with the star stories about your experiences, the better off you will be, because this thing won't throw you for a loop. It will actually be your benefit, because you'll be able to articulate a specific situation when you dealt with a customer, irate customer, or whatever the type of question is. If you have that in your toolbox, you pull that out, you'll be more successful even in that type of interview situation.
Great. Bonnie said, you said something about engineers and the most flexible component of a system. I'm not sure if I got this right. Would you mind repeating this, please?
Sure. As an organizational development consultant, while I was in training at the Fort Ord, California, we talked a lot about systems theory. Every organization is a system. A system consists of input, processes, and output, whatever the system is. So take, for example, an oil refinery plant. It takes raw oil or products, refines them a little bit, and has an output. The one component in that system, the entire closed system, is that the most flexible is the part that controls the system. That's a basic theorem of systems theory. And as a person, you are interacting with another organization. They are a system. You are a component of that system as the person being interviewed. The more flexible you are, the more control you have over the situation. As a behavioral interviewer, if you are the one who is most flexible, you can control the particular situation such that you can achieve the desired outcome by being as flexible as you are. If, for example, you are a visual type of person, but the candidate you are considering is a auditory person, wants to talk about their successes rather than draw you a picture or show you a chart or something like that, then you can flex to that particular person's style. You are the person that is controlling that situation. Well, ideally, as a candidate for that position, you want to be that one that's flexible. If you recognize that the person is a visual, then try it out and test it out to see if that is in fact true. And if so, make your presentations of your star stories in a visual format. I saw the opportunity. I saw some potential in this particular person. I saw an opportunity, the ability to be able to reduce costs simply because it was chaos in the factory floor. Whatever that is, the more flexible you are in that interaction, the more likely you are achieved to success.
Great. All right. Well, I think we'll wrap it up here. Paul, did you want to, you had, I think, another slide to show.
Sure. This is my follow-up, and that this is my guarantee to anybody out here who's in this workshop today or in the future who comes in. My contact information on LinkedIn is right there. I am on LinkedIn profile. Connect with me. If you have a specific question or you have a particular situation you want me to help you with in designing your star story, I'd be happy to share that, share the screen with you. We can get on Zoom if you want to, or you can call me on my telephone. I will give you that information through LinkedIn, and we'll be able to work out that particular detail for you and help you out in preparing for your behavioral interview. So connect with me, mention that you were in this workshop or that you viewed this workshop, and ask questions away, and I'll be glad to help you. I'll get back to you as soon as possible.
Paul, thank you very, very much. Here's Paul's LinkedIn profile. Here's what it looks like. Like I said, if you want to connect with them, connect, but please, please, please send that personal note. Let him know that you saw him here today so that, you give him a reason to want to try to connect with somebody. That would be great. Paul, thank you very much. Next week for the fourth Friday or the fourth Wednesday of our interviewing special guest speaker series, Carol Burkell will be with us. She's going to talk about secrets for an effective interview. So that will wrap up our 4 weeks of special speakers, and then we'll start back again in May with our 13-part series. We're putting on training 5 days a week, Monday networking, Tuesday LinkedIn, interviewing on Wednesday, effective resumes on Thursday, the North Dallas Plano Career Focus Group on Fridays. Join us Monday through Thursday. Lunch and learn. Get your lunch and sit and join and watch us. Tomorrow for Effective Resume Thursday at 1 o'clock Central, brand new resume guidance. Carol has been the last 3 days at a conference via online with all the latest tricks from her professional counseling seminar, and she'll be talking about the new things that they're talking about right now the latest things that are being talked about in resumes. This Friday at the North Dallas Plano Career Focus Group, Life Lessons with Steve Zipkoff. If you haven't heard Steve Zipkoff, you will be motivated. You will leave a happy person when you're done, after you get done hearing him. Steve has been hired, fired, right-sized, downsized, laid off, anything you can riff, whatever you can talk about. One of the things he invented the dollar menu, and 3 months later got fired because of it. So come join Steve. This event will not be recorded, so if you want to see Steve, you will need to watch him live in person Friday morning. Monday, Networking Mondays. Tom Jackson will be with us to talk about networking on Monday at 1 o'clock. Tuesday at 1 o'clock, our topic will be LinkedIn search engine optimization, how to optimize your profile to make sure people find you. Then next Wednesday, I said Carol Burkell will be with us to talk about secrets for an effective interview. Starting May 5th again, we'll get back to our 13-part seminar with Walt and Mark. I don't know if they've adjusted any of these titles yet. They haven't told me what the 13 titles will be. I'm sure there'll be some sort of order, something like this. They may rearrange them a little bit, I don't know. So this session has been recorded. It will be on the Career DFW Facebook page and the Career USA YouTube channel to view in the future. Please follow us on Facebook. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel. That way, every time we post a new video, you'll find out all about it. On the YouTube channel, it is the Career USA YouTube channel. You want to click on playlist if you don't see the different playlists, and then you'll see there that there's different topics that have been created. Don't click on the video, but click at the very bottom where that red arrow is, and it says View Full Playlist. And then what will come up is a list of all the topics in that subject that you can then scroll down and find the topic that you're looking for. If you're not receiving emails about our workshops, please join the Career USA mailing list. You can send an email to careerusa+subscribe@groups.io. You will not be spammed. I'm the only one who can send messages out from this group. And I put out 6 or 7 emails a week. The emails that go out every day have the Zoom link and the topic for the day. So that way you'll have the latest information to be able to join our workshops. Please note, Career DFW, we're a 501c3 nonprofit organization. All of our speakers are volunteers. I'm a volunteer. I've never gotten paid to do any of this. This is just my little charity to give back to those in the DFW area. We have no full or part-time employees. We survive on donations. Please consider making a donation when you get your next great job. So thank you for joining us today. Hopefully we'll see you later in the week. There's that email address if you'd like to join the mailing list. So Paul, thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.